Our world has shrunk. And that's a good thing when you think that we are facing labor shortages locally. Now, more than ever, we have the ability to hire offshore workers that not only help us fill the gap, but are super high skilled and capable people. And that's what we're talking about today on Marc Haine Live. Welcome to this episode. This is where small business owners and entrepreneurs develop new skills to help them create the jaw dropping, show stopping experience that their customers and their employees deserve. I am your host, customer and employee experience strategist, Marc Haine, and thank you so much for joining me today. Time being your biggest commodity, I appreciate the investment. My guest today is the CEO of Accelerance, Andy Hilliard. And today we will dive deep into the heart of building highly effective software and product teams across the globe. Now, my one ask is that if you know somebody who could use this information, please share the link to this episode. Knowledge is power, but gosh, only if we share it. So that's your big takeaway today. You know, whether you need customer support teams, marketing teams, product development teams. There is a whole world out there full of extremely capable people willing to do the work. And many leaders really dive into leveraging this talent with high hopes, only to find themselves tangled in a web of communication breakdowns, cultural misunderstandings, and a disjointed workflow that really slows down progress to an absolute crawl. And the truth is, creating a successful, globally distributed team is really a complex puzzle that many people are not able to solve. And so that brings us to our question of the day. So, first of all, I'd love to know from you if you are using teams from overseas. What has been your experience? Has it been a positive thing? Are you having some challenges? I'd love for you to be part of this conversation. Why don't you go ahead and post a link to this episode on your favorite social media platform, hashtag it experience leadership, and be part of this conversation. As I mentioned, I am really excited to be joined today by the CEO of Accelerance, Andy Hilliard. Andy leads and advocates for the globalization and collaboration of great software teams with companies in search of talent, innovation, and a globally distributed extension of their engineering functions and culture. Andy is originally from Sonoma, California, and has visited more than 60 countries. His passion for global travel, cultural appreciation, and cross-border collaboration stems originally from his experience as a Peace Corps volunteer in Costa Rica in the late 1980s. His contribution to the world of leadership and motivation overseas has been absolutely stellar. Andy, welcome to the show.
Marc, thank you very much for having me. I hope I can enlighten and share some anecdotes and knowledge for your audience.
Aside from my brain farts this morning, what did you tell us a little bit about how you serve your clients?
Sure. Well, I'm also glad, just for the audience sake, that you mentioned facets of business aside from product and software development, whether it's services or keystroke inputs or finance or customer service, because I think our conversation today is more broad than
Yeah.
just software and product development. And so, as you mentioned, sort of my journey started when I was a Peace Corps volunteer. Actually, if I really look back at it, I was having this sort of quarter life crisis at the time, 25 years old. What do I do with my life? I have a long life ahead of me. And I was actually working in a bank, which, by the way, no, no disparagement of working in a bank. It was actually very enlightening and trained me on a lot of skills. Actually, it probably got me into the Peace Corps because I had commercial lending experience and small business development background experience. So it helped me get into the Peace Corps. But really, my entire professional journey has emanated from the principles of the Peace Corps that just somehow, relate to the business that I'm running today, and the problem that we're trying to solve. And that is, like you said in the intro, how to build highly effective, globally distributed, and that includes domestically, U.S. distributed, just distributed teams in general. And we find ourselves in a place in time when distributed work is becoming more de facto and less unique. People aren't coming into the office much, and frankly, if people could work from home effectively and still work as effectively, if not more effectively, as teams, there's a lot of benefits to be had by businesses and people themselves. So
Mhm. So, I know that your background is in software development space and production and that sort of inside that sort of way. Can you talk about some of the pros and cons to hiring things like offshore teams?
sure. Well, the internet still drives the world. Companies
Mhm.
are trying to digitalize themselves, become more efficient through digital means, whether it's, just running their own business or whether it's interacting with their external stakeholders, distribution channels, suppliers, customers, of course. So everything's becoming digital. And when it becomes digital, that means you need software engineers in order to build the systems, the applications that run that entire ecosystem or multiple ecosystems, and the demand for software engineers far outpaces. I mean, the demand for the demand for engineers far outpaces supply of engineers, either locally or domestically or globally. Not to mention, a lot of the work that gets done in building these applications is very specialized work. So it's not just general work. There are many kinds of software engineers, hundreds of different types that focus on, maybe a subject matter expertise or a vertical expertise or a special technology stack. So, and even within that, you have different functions. You have like QA, you have development, you have front end, you have back end, you have database. So the the demand for specialization really, and the supply of developers really drives this need to think outside the borders of your home, your town, your state, your country. And if people just stop thinking about, you know, my border, whatever that happens to be, there's just layers of an onion, right?
Mhm.
And start thinking about people and talent and how you blend them together. I know we can get into some, political, angles on that, but if you break it all down and just remove labels and talk about people as people and the skills that they bring, that's really what's driving it.
Yeah, my background has been through the entrepreneurial space way back in the 1980s, where if I needed staff, it was just a question of just putting an ad in the newspaper, and then I would get, 300 applications across my desk that I got the pick of the a pick of choice, right? I could just figure out how to streamline them, how to shortlist them, bring it down to, five really good candidates, take my time, really interview the people who would be a good fit. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful way to do business. Nowadays, though, we cannot just rely on the talent that's on our doorstep. It just seems to me that there's more and more talent out there that we'd be left behind if that's the way we operate. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, it actually is. And when people think of outsourcing or offshoring, we like to call it offshoring, but unfortunately, Google forces us to use the word outsourcing because that's what people search for.
Yes.
Um, because out, it is another label. Offshoring is just, where is the talent? It's all over the place. There's great talent everywhere. And
Mhm.
actually, one of the trends I want to talk about is people think we're outsourcing because it's cheaper. Well, that's really not a driver of value these days. In fact,
Right.
it's not becoming less cheap because, fortunately, this offshoring is creating a global middle class, and the cost of living is rising everywhere, which is actually good because it allows us to sell services and goods to other countries who now can afford to buy those things. So, really, the value is how to find the right talent, how to create an ecosystem within my own business on how to integrate or embed that talent,
Mhm.
and how to build teams that work sort of synergistically and together. How
Mhm.
to create this collaboration, this cohesion, this and this accountability that does not have a us versus them, a client versus supplier. And actually, let me just mention this before I forget it in this whole podcast. One of the things that I really liked about your podcast and even the intro slide, which was about being a servant.
Yes.
You know, honestly, my whole value proposition is around trying to get people to think of servant leadership.
Mhm.
Servant leadership is essentially, helping the person help you better. Helping what motivates them both intrinsically and extrinsically in order to give you the best service in return. In a way, you could think about that selfishly. It's like, oh, I'm getting the best of what I want. Well, that's exactly what you want in the first place. But how
Mhm.
do you get that? It's giving the other person what they need and they want in order to be the best version of themselves, and that comes back to you.
Yeah, it's so funny because it's kind of like the circle of life, right? You give to them the skills and the abilities to be able to do things. They are in turn can service your needs, but then at the same token, this evolutionary process just keeps on going, and you actually open up yourself. That in a previous podcast, I turned around and said, we're now in this relational economy where it's not just here's the money, do the job, clock in, clock out. Okay, we're done. Thank you very much. It's much deeper nowadays.
It is much deeper, and people can move and change, and they will, unless you give them a reason
Hmm.
for wanting to be there. And if you have selected them because they have a special skill set or the potential or hypothesis of the ability to deliver, the best amount of value to you, you need to, engage that person. You need to provide them the fuel to be their best self. And
Right.
by the way, you and I are going back and forth, and there's no discussion around product development or software development. This is a
Mhm.
sort of a universal truth, especially today.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what I like about this conversation is when we first started off, we were talking about product development, software development, and so on. But there are some universal truths, and COVID tipped the scale for us with this idea of remote working, where when people talked about it before COVID, it was an impossibility. You can't work from home. It's ridiculous. You have an office, you have a cubicle, come in every day, work at the cubicle, and then COVID proved to us after we got through the initial stigma of, oh my God, we have to invest in all this spy software to make sure you're doing the work that you're supposed to be doing that nobody actually used. And it got to the point where it's like, well, wait a second, you're delivering on the results. The
Yeah,
outcomes are there. So life is pretty darn good.
sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So in your experience, are there any misconceptions that lead businesses to struggle with hiring staff from other countries? Like what's holding them back?
What's holding them back, and if our audience here is mostly based in the United States, it's the fact that we have grown up thinking of offshoring as outsourcing and outsourcing as being very transactional, if not litigious. So essentially, I always use this example. I don't know where it came from, but I say, like, if you're thinking of outsourcing, like you want to source wicker chairs from China, where you give them a specification and you send it via email, and you might visit or not, but even you don't need to visit. But you expect to get A1 quality back at a very low price, and if you don't like it, you won't accept it, you won't pay for it. It may come to lawsuits, and people just have this sort of impression, especially here in America, where you want an arm's length transactional and potentially litigious binary relationship between yourself and the people doing work for you. In some instances, you can do that. If you're asking a resource or a team to do very simplistic things like build a wicker chair to specifications or just do data input, I'm going to give you data and I need fingers on keys, and that's all you do, then you can have that type of relationship. But if you're asking people to interact as part of a team or as part of a system, and it requires collaboration and cooperation, and it requires a degree of social artistry where you're communicating, you're interpreting, you're trusting one another, you're challenging one another, you're holding everyone to account, you're collaborating and agreeing on a certain path. That requires a whole different set of dynamics in terms of how you build a team, how you onboard a team, how you break down these silos of differences and labels, and how you build the team back up to work, as effectively as possible. And even with people doing piecemeal work, those principles can apply because, as I mentioned before, if you give the people that you interact with, that you contract with, that you hire outside of your, again, this doesn't have to be outside of the US. It could be outside of, wherever, your business, your geography. And you give them a reason, and you give them a mission, and you give them, purpose in what they do, and you make them feel like a part of a system. Uh, the value just in keeping them longer and keeping them more productive and keeping them, working like they have something to prove, and they want to please you, is value far and away above any sort of simple cost savings. Oh, I'm saving $5 an hour or $10 an hour. Yeah, but if the person turns over because they're unfulfilled, how much are you spending in knowledge lost, IP lost, searching for a replacement, onboarding, getting them all the way up to speed to where you were, before you lost them.
Yeah, it's and that doesn't change whether they're remote or in person. That
Yeah,
again, that's a universal dynamic, I think, that we're seeing workplaces with high levels of turnover, high levels of disengagement. I think the Gallup poll just released said that we're at the highest disengagement rate ever, and it was starting to look good. It was starting to look a little bit better during COVID, but now it's disengagement's at an all-time high now, and so we're
well,
obviously needing to learn a lot of skills.
this is why it's so imperative that we all lean back in to engagement. In
Yes.
fact, if you go back to my original comment about Americans in general have this sort of like binary, transactional, litigious approach to outsourcing, and then you throw in COVID and forced remote work, boy, that just like throws fuel to the fire as far as being more transactional and being more arm's length. Um, but this is a competitive world, and if you want the least amount of waves and the most amount of value created, you need to lean further in as opposed to out,
Yes.
away from that. You need to lean in, and then you will have a competitive advantage because not only will you be able to find better, more specific talent faster, still at cost advantages, but you're going to have a more effective team, and having a more effective team that is more, solidified and cohesive, creates value far and away above, the cost of the
Right.
resources.
Right. And there's a reputation benefit as well. I mean, if people know that you're like if people enjoy working for you, you're dealing with typically we're in industries where people will talk to each other. And
Sure.
so it like in software development is like a key point. Like people in software development know each other. And if they know that Jim is working for somebody who's really like outstanding, it's like they're doing this for you and they're training you to do this and they take and you're sticking with them. It's like,
Yeah.
how do I get in there? Right. And so
Well,
you
Mark,
you end
these
up with a
don't have
referral
in my
network.
notes. Yeah, this wasn't in my speaking notes today, but for example, I always use Glassdoor.com.
Yes.
that
Yep.
rates employers and people's experiences.
Yes.
I sort of use that as a measuring stick of my company.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that people, yes, they may turn over eventually because of life changes.
Yeah.
Of they may move, they may enter another phase of life. They
Mhm.
may want to search out different aspects of skill development. But I do want to make sure that people feel like, wow, this was a great experience. I was challenged. People were speaking candidly to one another. There was a lot of trust going on. I really learned a lot, and I appreciate my experience. And that's that. One attracts better employees.
Yeah.
It keeps employees, and just it just creates a more pleasant environment.
Yeah. Well, and I've always said the absolute definition of really good leadership in organizations is that people will leave you because they're evolving. They're not leaving you because they're pissed off.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
sure.
Which is a great way to do that. Now we're talking about, well, part of what we're talking about today is this idea of outsourcing, kind of going over the border and start working with talent that's overseas. How important is it to understand cultures that we want to tap into? How important is it for us to understand if we're going to be dealing with, I don't know, Germans or Filipinos or India? How important is it for us to understand the culture in which these people thrive in?
Extremely important. Let me draw two parallels here. So,
Sure.
going back to my Peace Corps days, so I was in Costa Rica for 3 years as a small enterprise development um, uh, volunteer, and getting back to the transactional element of Americans in general, but also of consultants. So we were there for 3 years. We were embedded in small communities. We were working with small businesses. I was with fisheries and ceramic associations. And there's three values of Peace Corps. One is the first value, and that is not to get your job done, even though it's one of the three values. But the first value is to understand and appreciate the culture of your host country nationals. Basically, it's to um, engender trust and relationships so that you can understand one another and work together more productively. The second value is to share and gain an understanding of imparting my culture, my American culture, and values with our host country nationals to give it context, to give it some truth, because people hear things and mostly they're wrong, but now they get to live with a volunteer and they get to see how he acts or she acts and how they conduct themselves and how they work, and they start drawing some real parallels to, oh, this is the way Americans really are. And the third value is to bring your specialty, your knowledge around whatever you're there, forestry or medicine or English education or in my case micro enterprise development. The same happens today when you're working with people outside of your culture. Probably 95% of our clients will spend a good deal of time in the first 6 months traveling to the country or region where they're outsourcing to. And that's specifically to understand and appreciate the culture of the people they're working with, the people that are they're bringing into their team, and also to share their own culture, the let's say the American culture with your outsourced team or team members. And those two things is the basis for a relationship, a trusting, radically candor, collaborative, accountable relationship where people understand one another. They understand what they mean. They feel open and confident enough to ask clarifying questions, and they're getting each other better. There's just this natural side, like you get me, I get you. It's really important to invest that time. And by the way, a lot of the listeners might think, well, that's a cost. That's a cost I don't want to bear. Believe me, the value you get back is in multiples. Not to mention, there's also personal fulfillment. Just the ability. And if you're a business owner, of course, this is a business expense, but you get to go and visit and learn about different cultures and to see things and to try things you haven't tried before. So consider that just a benefit of working with people from a different culture.
Yeah, yeah. I do know that, and I've talked to a lot of people in my industries where they've tried to leverage foreign workers or offshoring, and they said it was an absolute disaster.
Sure.
Do you have any examples from your experience where the failure to build this effective global team has led to catastrophic outcomes?
Sure, sure, absolutely. So, real briefly, one of the things that my company Accelerance does is we assess software development organizations around the world. So
Okay.
today there's about 28,000 software development organizations. Only a few years ago there was about 10,000. And the reason it's grown so incrementally over the last few years is because everyone's had to go remote, and it doesn't require buying or leasing long-term lease a big building where people will commute on a daily basis. The old days, and actually, a lot of people commute today, but the fact that this collaboration, and here we are on video talking to one another, sharing files and strategizing and doing daily stand-ups and getting aligned, this can happen. Well, this really allows the industry to decompartmentalize
Hmm.
and to distribute. So today, when you talk about a software development company in Costa Rica, it's probably 5% in Costa Rica and maybe 95% spread out through Latin America. And people still get on meetings like we're doing right now.
Hmm.
Um, so, yeah, we assess all of these companies around the world, and we try to select the top 1 or 2% based on remote due diligence. And then we get on planes and we visit these countries and we visit these companies and we get together with their thought and business and practice leadership. And we really dig down into like how legitimate, how certified, how prepared are they, what are their frameworks and their methodologies, how do they go to work, and what are the kind of clients that they work with. That really requires a lot of on-site, because remote, anyone can be anyone.
Sure.
You can throw up a company tomorrow and you can say you do everything well under the sun, and of course everyone says better, faster, cheaper. We do it
Hmm.
better, we do it faster, we do it cheaper. Who do you trust? So the litany of failures that we've seen by being inundated with options and not knowing who to trust, who is credible, who has a history or experience of working with clients like you. It all becomes words. It's just words and smoke and mirrors and Mark, a lot of companies come to us and say, like, who do I trust?
Yeah.
Who is legitimate? And there's a couple things. Well, you have to do the right due diligence, but you also have to get on planes and you have to build relationships, because relationships count a lot in service organizations. Service providers want to serve someone who cares about them. It gets back to servant leadership, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And you have to validate they are who they are, and what they do is what they do, and what you need to get done they've done many times before, and that the people are real and they're hardworking, and that they're seeing that you're investing time in them and they want to invest time in you. I always tell clients, you want to be somewhere between client number 2 and number 9. You don't want to be the biggest client because you have too many eggs in their basket, but anything under 10 or 15 or 20, the world revolves around prioritization. If you're a small client, you're going to be treated accordingly, unfortunately. But if you're strategic, if you're important, if you care, if you invest the time and energy, then you'll get it back in multiples.
I love this whole premise of actually getting on a plane and actually visiting them. I think to your point, a lot of people are trying to do this cheaper, faster, and they look at, oh well, if I have to take this much time to go out and source out my people and actually go and sit in a hotel room with them and talk to them or see businesses that I want to deal with. It's just going to take so much time. It's just going to cost me so much more. I better just keep doing what I'm doing, and we'll just get by, which I think is very
Get
short
more
sighted.
attention. You're going to get better resources. You're going to get better output. You're going to get lower turnover. You can
Hmm.
leapfrog your way in the priority list of other clients a service provider is serving, just by showing you care.
I love that. And it makes so much sense, and yet we kind of skip over it, don't we? We kind
We
of
do.
go
We are so
again.
quick. to
Yeah.
to a solution. Like, let me throw you some requirements and start doing that. Oh, it's not how I wanted it, so I'm going to fire you. Well, maybe it's because they didn't understand you. You didn't understand them. You
Yeah.
didn't put it in the format that that they needed to get. It's and I know you've probably used this 100 times in your podcast. It's you have to go slow to go fast.
Mm-hmm.
You really do. You can't just
Yep.
flick a switch. I know we'd like to, but you really can't. But that's okay because the value is down the road, and you're going to get so much
Right.
more of it if you just invest a little time and effort.
I'd love to delve more into some more best practices about engaging people offshore, and we'll get to that right after this.
When the spotlight shines on your business, are customers applauding or yawning? In other words, how is your business performing? Make your business a star with the new book, Lights, Camera, Action, Business Operational Excellence Through the Lens of Live Theater by Marc Haine. Marc uses his business and acting experience to help you see your business like a live show, so you can create a performance your customers will never forget. Buy Lights, Camera, Action today at your favorite online retailer or directly at marchaine.com.
Welcome back. I am speaking with Andy Hilliard. We're having a great discussion. And, it's so funny that we started off with a premise of one thing and it just starts lobbing itself and snowballing into bigger things. This whole idea of like building trust and building relationships and getting people to understand who you are and you understanding who people are. Do you think services like Fiverr or Upwork has set different expectations now on how we look at offshore help or outsourcing?
Yeah, it's really exacerbated this whole transactional approach, and it pains me to say this because again, Americans or people in westernized countries or first world countries, we all like to get done, and we like to get it done quickly and very transactionally. We like
Mm-hmm.
our apps. We like our to be able to go in and just DIY it.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone wants to DIY it, and when you're building teams that have to collaborate and cooperate,
Mm-hmm.
teams of especially teams of different cultures, people aren't widgets. This
Yeah.
is a dynamic organization that people are communicating and they're depending on one another and they're transferring work from one person to another, and they need to work efficiently and effectively. Unfortunately, what's happened over the last couple of years is these tools like Upwork or TopTal, where you can go find talent and you can find a person one-off. And a lot of people, if there's a system, people are going to game the system. So it's if you think you're looking for the right talent and the talent and people know what you're looking for, they're going to pose themselves as what you're looking for so that you choose them. And the whole premise of what you're using the tool for just falls completely apart.
Right.
When you're doing one-offs, which is why we tend to focus on partners, because partners have a culture. They have a value system. They hire based on, meeting all of these criteria in addition to skills. And they have a professional hiring organization that can scale much quicker. But if you're doing one-offs and you think you're buying what it says you're buying, or what you think you're buying based on what you read and what you hear, you really don't know what you're buying. And if you're having to do this multiple times, then you're just incrementally doing this multiple times. And usually that leads to leaving a really bad taste in people's mouths, not to mention the chaos of herding cats, of hiring multiple cats and then having to herd them. It just makes this whole concept of distributed work, offshoring, outsourcing, whatever you want to call it. It gives it a bad impression because people think they can solve their problem just by using a tool, when in fact that's probably the opposite of what you have to do. Unfortunately, we live in this transactional tool-based world, this instant gratification world.
Right.
And instant gratification in anything usually leads to bad outcomes.
Right. And, to your point, we are in the get her done kind of mindset. I do know that, a lot of listeners, entrepreneurs, people in their businesses, they unfortunately have so much time with their head down trying to get the work done
Yeah.
without knowing how to be able to delegate it, without knowing who to turn to. They know perfectly well that they can't hire people full time to be able to do stuff. Drawing from your experiences, if they wanted to explore kind of outsourcing or offshoring, what are the first steps companies need to take to pivot towards a more successful global team building strategy?
Well, there's a couple of components in that question.
Hmm.
Depending on what they're looking for, and I don't want to focus this right around software and product development. We have a methodology that I think extends to sort of any facet of work that you want to offshore. Um, First and foremost, I mentioned using partners as opposed to individuals, and again, it depends on the scale of what you're doing. But partners give you the advantage of having sort of consistency if you find the right partner, and the partner is led by strong business and thought and good practitioners. Smart people attract smart people. Good skilled people attract good skilled people, and the opposite of true is true, of course. But if you do the due diligence, if and I could help you. Yeah, prioritize exactly how you can do due diligence remotely, and not forgetting about the value of getting on a plane and meeting people. They appreciate that. You appreciate that. You learn a lot in the meantime. But partners allow you to scale quickly if you find the right partner. So the other thing is you have to change your mindset on how you're going to build a team. You have to not think in terms of silos or labels or client versus vendor. If what you're outsourcing requires collaboration, you need to lean into this servant leadership, and you need to lean into appreciation and understanding, and that's going to come back to you in waves.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Again, it's to your point, like you mentioned earlier, it's about that investment that you make at the forefront to be able to define the relationship, the type of relationship that you want to have. I imagine that the trust that's built by investing heavily on the forefront is going to be something that's going to be. I mean, Stephen Covey uses a trust bank account as a metaphor for you put trust in, and when things go terribly, terribly wrong, you haven't overdrawn necessarily. So you haven't broken down that trust. But without having those deposits, any flaw in trust or any flaw in mistakes is going to be seen in a negative way and you'll end up being overdrawn in that trust bank account. And so you
Uh, I
absolutely will
like your
kill those
reference.
relationships.
I like your reference to Covey. We're a Covey Institute user ourselves,
Oh, okay.
and these principles apply, to any individual or any business.
Hmm.
We're also a Pat Lencioni follower, and his 5 dysfunctions of a team.
Hmm.
I would highly recommend that people look that up because it applies to your own team. It applies to hiring contractors domestically, internationally. If you can achieve those principles, you will build a highly effective team. It doesn't stop at our border. It is people principles.
Yeah. And that's
Trust.
and I think if anybody's going to take anything away from this episode, that's it right there. These are
Yeah,
people principles.
yeah.
This is fascinating conversation, Andy. How can people get in touch with you if they want to leverage your service or get in touch with you to ask you some questions?
Um, well, let me preface that by saying I didn't come from the software world. I am not a
Mhm.
software engineer. I've been in the software world since the mid '90s, and but I think my Peace Corps experience and my MBA and my business experience in general is about what we've been talking about, Mark.
Mhm.
Is about bringing people together and allowing people to leverage one another around the world. We have the tools to find them, but just finding them and not putting them into an ecosystem that is conducive for value creation and relationship building is so critical. No matter what our audience is dealing with,
Right.
they can find me at Andy at accelerance.com. If you want to, benchmark your existing offshore or outsourcing relationships, if you're looking to scale that or distribute it over, geography to find the best talent, if you're new to it and you want to have a positive first experience in that, I would say, please reach out to us. Please reach out to me individually, and I'll get you on the right path. And otherwise, I'll be more than happy to just give you some principles of offshoring or outsourcing in general, no matter what your walk of life is.
I love it. Andy, I'd love to get into some practical do's and don'ts, and we'll get to that right after
Sure.
this.
When you're delivering an important speech to a huge audience, it's easy to lose your place or go way over time. Give yourself an advantage with the Pro Speaker Presentation Speech Timer app. No more checking your watch or calling for time. The Pro Speaker Presentation Speech Timer app keeps you on track with easy-to-see timers, even changing color for visual prompts during your speech. And you can set audio cues to practice, or set it to vibrate so you don't even have to look. Be the pro you know you are. Download the app at speakerpresentationtimer.com.
As you can tell, Andy and I are passionate about helping entrepreneurs and business managers just like you. So if you belong to an industry association or are planning a conference or leadership retreat and you feel that we could maybe be of service, feel free to drop us a line or do a connection request. Our details are in the show notes. It's so funny, Andy, because what we're talking about today, if there was a servant leadership bingo card, we have tapped into so many different aspects of what it means to be a servant leader. And if we were to erase the whole remote offshoring side of it, what we're talking about really good leadership practices as a whole. Open communications, understanding where people are at, and so on. What do you find the most rewarding aspect of managing high-performing global distributed teams to be?
That people from all walks of life, no matter where they happen to be, uh, they can be motivated both extrinsically and intrinsically in the work that they do on a daily basis by working across culture, but in real time together in achieving collective goals. I just find that extremely exciting that you can be working with someone thousands of miles away that grew up in a whole different world, and have somewhat different cultures, but you can create a single business culture where you appreciate and understand one another, but you're also collectively working towards the goal of the team. And that's the reason I like that is it combines personal and professional together. And a lot of times, we spend all day long just working on our profession. We're
Yes.
like in this little bubble, and it's like this artificial world we live in. And then once we, click off, and get off of that, we rush back to our personal life. And this was a way to learn and grow and interact and communicate with people all around the world that we didn't have the chance to do except for the last couple decades. We're the ability to be in real time all over the world together.
Yeah. And I have a virtual assistant who's located in the Philippines, and I have another one that's in Thailand. And I'm forever making sure I'm staying on top of the news because I want to know when they get hit with an earthquake. I want to know when there's a tsunami. I want to know. And we get to the point where I know my VA, I know she's got a parent that's just gone into hospice care and that she's had to move. She's had to actually fly to a different city and she's, set up to do the work and whatever. And she had some challenges with that. And I felt as long as we can maintain the communication of what was going on with her, it wasn't a question of she's letting me down because now she's got to concentrate on something or she couldn't be available for 4 hours on a particular day, because I was able to understand what was going on in her world. And so being
Yeah.
open to that, I thought was just the key.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Do's and don'ts. I'm always fearful that people take information and they look at it as being an instant band-aid solution to something, or it becomes the policy or the the initiative of the month. Do you have any cautionaries, any pitfalls you'd like to share?
Sure. I'll try to put them in do's and don'ts. So
Okay.
what you should do is think about creating a sort of a no blame culture, treating everyone as equal.
Mhm.
You want to start by fostering trust. Trust is it. Measure everything based on, are you moving the trust needle in the right direction? That's the genesis of effective collaboration, first and
Mhm.
foremost. Don't differentiate people in terms of location or employment status. You really need to advocate for sort of uniform processes and culture for all. We at Accelerance, we have this thing called One Shore, because we're trying to, again, eliminate labels and borders and politics, and we want to create a single culture where everyone is equal. You want to focus on or appreciate diversity, and everyone should be leaning into diversity. And just like you said, Marc, about your interest in people's lives and what's impacting them, and if you have a baseline of how they define their values and what's important to them. I think from a business perspective, everyone wants to be held accountable, but in order for them to be held accountable, you too need to be understanding and appreciative and sensitive to other people's value system, where they come from. I'll say it again: foster servant leadership. Empower people, give them responsibility, clear obstacles for people as much as possible, and set clear goals for everyone. Again, treat everyone as equal. Lastly, I would say try to break work down into small chunks, what we like to call iterate frequently, and shorten feedback loop, because you are coming from different cultures and different places, and you need to be more interactive. Again, don't think of this as transaction or binary, where you throw things over, you go into a black hole, and you expect perfection coming out of it. Unfortunately or fortunately, it requires a lot of iteration and a lot of feedback. But again, the value will be created in waves if you do it that way.
I love it. This is so good. I hope if you're watching this, I'm hoping that you come back to the episode and actually take those down, because there's a lot of really good learning there. This has been a fabulous conversation, Andy. Can you remind everybody one more time how they can get a hold of you?
Sure. You could reach me by email at andy@accelerance.com, ACCELERANCE.com. You can look us up at accelerance.com also. And thanks for having me, Marc. I really
It's
appreciate
so
it.
great. So, Andy, before we sign off, do you have any last thoughts? One little piece of wisdom that people will remember as they click the end button.
Wow. That I haven't already imparted. Well, okay, I'll go off script here. Life is short. There's an entire world that we live on.
Yes.
And there's an amazing amount of people that have a lot to share and a lot of insight and wisdom before we exit, our moment on this stage. It fulfills people, I think, in general, to learn and expand their horizons, and to feel like they're a part of something, and that they don't live in this bubble their entire life, and then we just all disappear. I don't want to turn this podcast into a morbid sort of episode, but I would say, outsourcing and offshoring gives us a way to interact as a global citizen all the time, and to learn and to grow, and also to alter our own perceptions based on learning about people. And you can do this through work. It doesn't have to happen after work, on TV or maybe never. But this is like, it's all integrated together. We talk about, work-life balance.
Yeah.
And here we have the ability to work with people and to learn from them and to help one another.
And
So,
what a great way to destroy stereotypes and change
absolutely.
expectations and create understanding.
Well, that's
Yeah.
that's actually the better thing. It's like we are inundated with people trying to impose their viewpoints, their
Yes.
stereotypes, their perceptions on things. Take control of it yourself. Open yourself up, learn yourself, firsthand knowledge. I mean, aren't we
Yes.
all saying like, don't we all know that? And that's by working with people from different cultures.
Yes, and having your own experiences as well. Life is an experience. So, Andy, thank you so much. I really want to thank you for sharing your passion and expertise with us today. I really think it has been brilliant. Thank you for
Oh,
being
thank
such a
you.
terrific guest.
Oh, thanks, Mark. I appreciate that.
Why don't you let me know if this was of value to you? As always, my offer stands. That is, if you would like 30 minutes of my time to brainstorm your business with you and your team, feel free to book yourself on my online calendar. The link is in the show notes. It's the one that's marked meetwith.markhaine.com. It would be my absolute honor for me to be of service to you. And while you're at it, why don't you go ahead and leave a review about this episode? I'd love to get your feedback. Was this of value to you? It's the feedback is really important because if it was valuable to you, if you have any ideas on what you would like to do or would like me to do to cover on this podcast, I am more than happy to explore that for you and make absolutely sure that everything I bring you is relevant and timely to your needs. So thank you very much for joining me today. My name is Marc Haine. I hope you stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope you dare to be the exception.